All right, we are several seconds early. Usually, I think live streams start late, so we're bucking the trend here. That is what we're doing. We're bucking the trend.
Philip, like
Yeah,
wizards everywhere, we are precisely at the time in which we intended to be at.
right. That's right. A wizard is never early. He arrives precisely when he means to. So, yeah, here we are, everybody. Welcome to the live stream celebrating all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's a good excuse for a live stream, isn't it? 20,000 subscribers. My heartfelt thanks to every single one of you. It is incredible to me that 20,000 people would have even thought of hitting that subscribe button at one time or other. So, thank you. My heartfelt thanks to everybody. And oh, yes, this is the mystery guest. I know a lot of you were really puzzled about who this could be, but it is, in fact, AP Canavan from A Critical Dragon. Hello, AP. Welcome to the live stream.
Dr. Philip Chase, thank you so much for inviting me. I think people saw through the cunning disguise with which you altered my image.
I doctored the doctor. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. Congratulations, my friend, not only on 20,000 subscribers, but on moving ahead with self-publishing your book, all of the excitement and the announcements to do with that. So congratulations, Philip.
Thank you so much. And I'm seeing all these wonderful people here in the chat. And as usual, I'm having trouble with the button here. There we go. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you, everybody being here. I am just so grateful, really, to be part of this community, whatever the number. I'm not a numbers person, honestly. The YouTube studio where you do all the analytics and stuff it might as well be in a foreign language for me. But it just feels great to be part of this community and to have all these wonderful. Look at all these great people. Yes, right. I know. I was convinced that no one would guess that it was AP. There's Vaughn, and whoops, these keep moving around on me. And yes, nobody could have guessed. And I'm just trying to get through as many. I'm sorry ahead of time. I always feel guilty about. Oh, thank you, Glenn. That's very kind of you. And thank you very much. And there is Polly. Hello, hello. Thank you so much. And what would a chat be without Paul?
So, I believe Paul posted a short clip the other day.
I saw that. It's a gift.
There is not enough room on the naughty step for the amount of time and space that Paul occupies it.
I know. I think you should name it the Paul. Now, how do we pronounce his name correctly? I mean, technically, it's Vandolaword or something like that, but Vandalweird is my preferred pronunciation. So it's the Paul Vandalweird Naughty Step. That's what it is.
The Weird Vandal. There you go.
Yes. Oh, and there's Rob Paul. Great to see you, Rob. And look at all these great people. Okay. All right. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed Dark Tower tremendously.
And so, Philip, did we have a plan for today, or are we just going to hang out and chat?
I think we should just sit and hang out and chat, right? But also, if people have questions and stuff, there are some other things to celebrate as well. Like Theo just mentioned, my books are coming out, and you had a hand in the preparations of that book, as I think everybody here probably knows that you are my developmental editor. That is the correct term. And so you have not only read the first book and helped me with all kinds of really awesome feedback on it, but also books 2 and 3. So yeah.
I mean, I'm so glad I encouraged you to add more lasers and aliens and
yep,
the time travel. That was very, very important.
The phone booth,
Yeah. Well, we had to change. I told you to change that because it was a little too similar to something else. So didn't you change it to a Portaloo?
So Doctor Who has a phone booth and I've got the porta potty. Yeah. That somehow just feels very fitting, doesn't it?
Well, it's one of those things. If you've got to go somewhere, you might as well take it with you.
Colin, don't tell anyone, okay? Don't tell anyone. All right. Thank you, Kyle. And look at all these. Yes. All right. I'm going to try to pay attention to what we're saying here. Oh, and there's PL. I got to say hi to PL. And thank you. All right. All right. So I'm kind of caught up here. So let's talk a little bit about what we're reading at the moment. How about we start with that? Because I'm excited by what you're reading. And I think some people are going to be interested in hearing about it too. So why don't you hold up that beautiful book there? Da, da, da. So any of you out there who were waiting for our chat on Curse of the Mistwraith, the first book in the Wars of Light and Shadow by Jenny Wirtz, guess what? It's on. So we probably tell Jimmy and Joanna too.
Well, this is the thing. I have to apologize to everyone because last year I had a hell of a year. This year there was a lot going on, and it's not stuff that I generally want to discuss with the world.
Right. Right.
But it did put a serious crimp in the plans that we had made with other people.
Yes.
All of these sorts of things. Life sometimes happens. And to be perfectly honest, as much as I love doing YouTube, as much as I love chatting to people and doing these videos and doing it has to take a back burner to real life concerns and issues and priorities. And it was an unfortunate thing. And I do apologize to everyone, but I've gotten a bunch of stuff taken care of. Things have been rescheduled. And so now I'm getting back on the wagon, so to speak.
Yes, which is wonderful. And you know what? I think without getting into any details, work happens. You got busy with work and life and responsibilities. And that's just the way it is. We do BookTube because we love this stuff. It's a hobby. But real life does have its, it does rear its head sometimes, and we can't always do all the reading and chatting that we would love to do. But speaking of which, the Cripple God chat, yes, we are going to be doing that eventually. We're obviously going to be doing Curse of the Mistwraith before that. And then sometime after Curse, we're going to tackle our remaining Malazan chats. We are committed to finishing that off. So that could be a little while. We don't have a firm date on that because once again, AP has stuff going on, and I do too. Honestly, I have this little, book coming out and stuff like that. So,
really? You have a book coming out? I hadn't heard. What? Tell me about this book, Philip.
I do have a book coming out. Yes, The Way of Edan. You might have heard of it. You might have.
The Way of Edam. It's about cheese.
Yes, I can't wait for all the cheese jokes, especially from our Europe. I feel like more Europeans are going to get that. I don't know how many Americans have heard of Edam cheese. Is it a Dutch cheese? Do I have that right? Yeah,
I think so.
I mean, you Europeans tend to be cheesier than we Americans. I mean that your cheese is better.
Oh, yeah? As opposed to putting cheese on everything, which I believe is an American pastime.
Yes. Well, we tend to have cheese that comes out of a spray can, whereas you have cheese with like fancy names and stuff like that.
I remember I was in the States one time, and I was with my wife, and we'd gone to this little place, and we were ordering food. And I went, it was a deli, and they were making sandwiches, and they said, like, do you want like American cheese on it? And I said, what's American cheese? Because is it cheddar or Cheshire or Edam or Brie, Roquefort? Like, there's cheese. What's American cheese? She goes, here, try a little bit. And she handed it to me, and I put it in I went, how could you let me put that in my mouth? I have this thing, I think, once went to college with actual cheese and, hung out with cheese for a while and went, I can be cheese.
Yeah.
And decided that's what it wanted to be when it grew up. But, never finished the course. And
I'm not sure it ever even came out of a cow, to be honest, but
But the thing, there are some beautiful cheeses that you can get in America.
Yes. Oh, yes. That is true. Yeah.
It's,
Yes.
I think maybe this was just it was a bland, generic cheese product.
Cheese product. Yes. Cheese inspired product. Yes. So yes, Jarl will be in a discussion soon on Shadow of the Torture. I actually have finished reading it. I know you've read The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe before.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna...
It is a brilliant text.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm feeling it's like, what did I just read? Kind of.
And it's weird. It's one of those ones that if you go, we've been talking about this before about the sort of the modern tendency to be a very literal reader.
Yeah.
That you sort of, what is on the page, you go, oh, this is what happened. And that's not how a lot of literature is written. A lot of it is written from a subjective perspective.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about this before in terms of unreliable narration, that some narrators are unreliable because they are deliberately lying to you.
Right.
Some narrators are unreliable because they are not seeing the whole picture.
Right.
And the term unreliable applies to both sets. So it sometimes can be a bit confusing, but it's sometimes better to say untrustworthy, as in a narrator whose knowledge is subjective, i.e. they don't know everything and can make mistakes, but is honest. And then untrustworthy is one that is either lying to themselves or lying to you in the narrative.
Right.
When you have that style of narration, sometimes it's important to remember that the author has deliberately done that, because like Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun, there is some quite not nice stuff in it.
Yes.
The treatment that Severian, how he treats certain other people.
Right.
But again, inclusion is not endorsement. And also, there's a lot of it of Severian misremembering things, making stuff up, and it's playing around with this perception of reality and how so much of our perception is subjective.
Right.
And what we see as this is what happened, this is the truth, is always filtered through that personal lens. And when an author leans into that, it can be like an absolutely fascinating text, because you're working at multiple levels, trying to figure out what it is that they are saying, and then trying to translate it and extract meaning from it, and then sort of go, oh, well, this is what they're actually saying. And Gene Wolfe is a master not only at playing with the language, but playing with perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
when a narrator keeps telling you, I have a perfect memory, you should be a little suspicious, right? Methinks he doth protest too much, right?
Exactly.
So,
and the number of, I can't remember what it was that I was reading one time, and in it was very clearly the fact that the narrator had misremembered something. And I remember seeing on the forum someone going, oh, the author made a mistake because that's not how it happened earlier on. And you go, no, the character made a mistake. Like, right. And it's when we do that sort of surface read, and we're just looking at a very literal interpretation of what is happening on that very superficial level, sometimes we miss that nuance. And there are great stories that operate entirely on that level. It's not that every story needs to do this.
Right.
But when an author chooses to use that style, it's one of those ones that if you enjoy it, like, it is a brilliant experience. Yeah. And if it's not your cup of tea, then fine. That doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make it a mistake. It doesn't make it dumb. And
and we're usually talking about first-person narrator when we're having these discussions about the reliability. My book is third person, so more or less you could. I think I'm a reliable guy, right? So you can rely on my narrator, my third-person narrator, I think. Speaking of which, PL, I am going to tell you right now that in answer to your question, so the Way of Edan is going to be out on March 21, everybody. That's the date. That's the release date for book 1. And book 2 is going to be June 21st, and book 3 is going to be September 21st. So pretty easy to remember. Right around the change of the season or so, that's when the books are going to come out. And I will not have the option to do a pre-order on the paperback. That's something that Amazon KDP does not allow. So there will be no pre-orders on the paperback. But if somebody wants the ebook, I'll probably have a couple weeks of pre-order time before March 21st for the ebook, at least, of The Way of Edan. And that is something I've gotten lots of advice about too. And probably too, as an author yourself, PL, how do you time these things and all of that? And I was told you don't want to have pre-orders available too far in advance of your first book for various reasons, because I guess the way Amazon counts orders or whatever is it's not like on release day, all the pre-orders count toward the stats. It's just every day that an order happens, that's when they count it or something like that. Oh. So basically, yeah, I've been told you don't want to do it too early was the gist of it. But anyway, I'm trying to catch up to comments now. Yeah, totally right, Matt. A perfect memory. And then the irony. Yeah. So yeah, exactly right. So I just finished reading it, and I'm still it's stewing in here, and I have thoughts, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it with Matt from Matt on Books, and also a guy who's not a booktuber, but like you, there's actually more than one person out there doing a PhD in fantasy. I think Paul Williams. Yeah. So he's going to be in our chat as well.
Well, amazingly, more and more people now are doing PhDs in literature that focus on fantasy literature. Yeah. And it is absolutely phenomenal to see, because I certainly wasn't the first. Like ICFA, the conference I go to, the International Association for the Fantastic and the Arts, it has been going for 44 years. And it was started by a guy called Robert Collins, who was an academic in Florida. And I think he was at Florida Atlantic University. That's where he was. It was either Florida Atlantic or it might have been Broward. But he started the conference because he wanted a venue for all those medievalists and various other literature professors who had a love of fantasy, but whose departments were a bit snobby, or that, none of the academic journals at the time were interested in, say, an analysis of colonialism in The Lord of the Rings. Like they weren't interested in that. Yeah. And yet there were so many, it's such a rich vein of literature to explore so many different things.
Yeah.
And so he started this conference, and like from that point on, it has been like an international destination for scholars of the fantastic. And that's how I met my wife.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah. And I went there myself last year. Regretfully, I'm not going to be able to go this year because I can't afford to go, because I'm spending all this money on publishing a book. So, but I'll be back. I'll be pestering you in 2024 at ICFA for sure. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing that I think a lot of people who like to engage here on BookTube would groove out at a place like ICFA. But keep in mind that it is a scholarly conference. It is a place where people read formal papers. And so I think everybody knows the difference between a scholarly conference and like a convention where people dress up as their favorite character or whatever.
Yeah, fewer Spock ears at a conference.
Yeah. In spite of the video I once made about the pony ride that the cosplay pony ride. Actually, there is no cosplay at ICFA. So not that I know of. Have you ever gone to ICFA dressed up as a fantasy character, AP?
No.
You could start a trend, right?
No.
You could go dressed as Conan or Gandalf or something. I'm sure it would be a hit.
No.
Okay, fine.
Well, and because it's Florida, tweed really isn't the best material to be wearing down there. It's a touch warm.
Yeah, it's a little warm for tweed. This is true. So sorry, Paul, you won't find tweed at ICFA, but I wore a jacket there. I did have a nice silk jacket that I wore at ICFA. So
yeah, and like the inside is, you know, air conditioned, so like you can wear a jacket and tie if you really wanted to.
You almost need to. Yeah.
It's weird. That was something I noticed in American conferences. A lot of the graduate students, when they were first presenting, a lot of them would be dressed like very, very formally.
Yeah.
Whereas in my experience from academic, as long as you were smartly dressed, like you hadn't just wandered in your pajamas, that as long as you'd made some effort to be wearing clean clothes, that was generally fine. But it was so strange seeing like a lot of young American scholars, and they were always very formally dressed. So much so that I was sort of going, like, I look scruffy.
Yeah, well, it's partly, you know, the uniform. Thank you, Joanna. It's the uniform. You got to put on the uniform that makes people aware that you're smart, right? So some of this, so the glasses and the tweed and everything else.
Do I need to go and get glasses now?
I think it would help. I think it would help. What's that? So instead of the expression putting lipstick on a pig, putting glasses on. Oops. Okay, we'll behave here. We'll behave.
Yellow card, nemesis.
So yeah, I mean, it's but it's a great time. ICFA was a really fantastic time, and I just love the fact that there is a conference, that there is respect in academia, and not universally, but enough that this fantasy conference has been going on for so long. And a lot of people have the impression that academia is hostile to all genre fiction. That's not quite accurate, is it?
No. And even then, there's an expectation that, it's fantasy. No one studies that. And yet, when you look at a lot of literature departments, they'll go, so we have a module on the Gothic. You're like, right, Gothic, that would be supernatural fiction, and a genre.
Yeah.
And it's not a genre because it's historical time period, and it's a particular time. Also, it's a category of fiction with established tropes and styles, and that's a genre. But the thing is, so Gothic would be studied, or magic realism would be studied, or looking at specific authors, and they go, that person, but that's not really fantasy. It may involve like fairy tale creatures, but it's not fantasy, because there's an idea. People have an idea of what fantasy is, and we all do this. We have an idea of what it is, and that's why you get these interviews with people going, like I don't really write fantasy. I write this sort of thing, and you go, it has dragons in it. You write fantasy. Or Margaret Atwood, who put a lot of people involved in the science fiction community, put their back up when she said, I don't write science fiction because that's all spaceships and ray guns, whereas my fiction's serious, and I'm writing science fiction is more than spaceships and ray guns, just like fantasy is more than dragons and fireballs.
Actually, I think science fiction, and I'm not an expert in it, I've read a few of the classics and some of the more modern ones, and I feel like it's a very wonderful genre for exploring ideas. It is an idea-driven genre. That's my impression anyway. And as far as fantasy goes, I think fantasy is ideal for exploring the deep psychological recesses of humanity. I think there's just, these are genres that actually work really well to do some of the most important things we do in storytelling, I think. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I agree that science fiction, fantasy, and horror, a lot of the more fantastical modes of writing, they move away from a replication of reality into exploring something. And, that's what we do with fiction. We are always exploring. And it's whether we're exploring the familiar or we're exploring the unfamiliar, the defamiliar. And science fiction, fantasy, horror, magic realism, folklore, fairy tale, mythology, myths, legends. We have always used different ways of viewing the world to get at a different angle on the truth, rather than simply replicating the norm. And that is one of the great things. Why did Shakespeare choose to, have the Tempest and have Prospero being a magician and having these spirits? Romeo and Juliet doesn't have that. So why did he do it with the Tempest? Because he wanted to explore those things. That mimesis, or the recreation of a version of reality, is not the be all and end all of what serious fiction is.
Right.
You can have incredibly serious, thought-provoking, brilliant, inspiring, emotionally devastating and moving, poignant, harrowing stories.
Yep.
It doesn't matter that it is on a secondary world, on a moon, in a different galaxy, in a different time period, that the physics of the reality are different. It's about speaking to a central concern, the human condition, an aspect of our mind, our emotion, our spirit. And fantasy, science fiction, and horror do all those things.
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And they're ideal, actually, vehicles for those things. So we're going to have everybody wants a booktube conference. It's sort of a fantasy of mine. And yes, Brooke, it would be cool to have it in New York City, because that would be easy for me. I live near New York. But I don't know if it'll ever happen.
Let me just get a mortgage to afford a conference in New York.
Yeah, that's the issue. New York conference is not going to be cheap. And speaking of the devil, here is Paul William. Paul, we were talking about you. I don't know if you were here earlier. We were talking about our Book of the New Sun upcoming discussion. And he is remarking on Le Guin's encounter with Cordwainer Smith. Yeah.
And again, Cordwainer Smith, brilliant author. Le Guin, one of the masters of science fiction and of fantasy. But it's with Le Guin, it was always her science fiction that I was more deeply in love with. Earthsea has a very special place in a lot of people's hearts, because when they encountered it in their sort of reading journey.
Yeah.
But I encountered Le Guin when I was older, and I was studying science fiction and reading a lot more SF. And The Dispossessed, The Left Hand of Darkness, The Lathe of Heaven, and a lot more of those texts. Le Guin explored different aspects of sociology, of politics, of how humans relate to one another. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to take it out of the established paradigm, change one thing, put it back in, and see what happens. And that is easier to do in science fiction than it is to do in realist fiction, because in realist fiction, people go, but that's not how those people are. I know it's fiction. I'm exploring something. It isn't real. It's fiction. That's why it's in the fiction section.
We have various proposals for conferences now, right next to probably where everybody lives. So, and we have some Europeans here, which is wonderful. There's Amsterdam. Nice. Also, yes, Glenn, I'm going to be talking about Earthsea in the very near future with Glenn, and that is going to be awesome. It is a favorite of mine. The Earthsea series is probably, speaking of my books, I would say after Tolkien, probably Le Guin is one of my most fundamental influences, I would say, as a fantasy fan, as a fantasy reader. So I feel like when I talk about Earthsea, particularly, I'm going back to my roots. But I do agree with you about her science fiction. There's a short story of hers that I teach. We've talked about it before. I think The Ones That Walk Away from Omelas, which I think is just everybody in the world should read. I think it's just brilliant. Here's a fan of Left Hand of Darkness. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, we've got some shout outs there to Le Guin science fiction as well. Yeah.
But is it like the Left Hand of Darkness? And obviously that's a lot of that was playing with gender and the idea of a non-gendered race that only becomes either male or female when they go into camera, when they have a sort of breeding cycle. And yet, because it was written at a certain time, and this is something we've talked about a little bit before, not only the male gaze, but the presumption of a male norm, a male-based norm, because when they were when Le Guin has the characters referring to other characters,
Right.
the male pronoun is used, even though they are not male, they are not female. They are asexual, agendered at that moment in time until they camera.
Yeah.
But the male pronoun is used because it's just that was the convention at the time. So it's when you talk about, oh, so a reader will encounter this text and he will find there's this was the convention, the assumption of a male default norm.
Yeah.
And Le Guin then wrote a follow-up short story, Coming of Age in Carhide, where to show how blatant that is, she flipped it. She had every character being referred to as female, and just flipped the convention.
Yeah.
And it is stunning how, when you first read it, coming out of reading a whole load of stuff of that era, that when you first read Coming of Age in Carhide, how arresting it is and how strange it is that every character is referred to as female. Right. And you go, how much of this have I unconsciously been taking in? Because I don't react the same way, or I didn't react the same way when every character was referred to as male.
Yeah.
So why is that? And it's part of this base norm, this unconscious norm that pervades so much, and we don't notice it until it is challenged. And Le Guin was great at challenging those things. And then was it Anne Leckie, much more recently, with her Ancillary Justice? It was a trilogy of books. She sort of went on it and followed on, sort of exploring this sort of thing that Le Guin had already done. Marge Piercy's Woman on the Edge of Time. She used per. So it was, you went into the future and everyone was per for person, not he and him or she and her. Per. Yeah. Everyone was per.
So ahead of her time, wasn't she? I mean, in so many ways. When I think to A Wizard of Earthsea, I think at that point Le Guin was younger, and that's a very patriarchal world for the most part that we get in A Wizard of Earthsea. But in the subsequent Earthsea books, you do have some exploration of feminism, particularly I think in the fourth book. The fourth book. But even a bit in the second, in the Tombs of Atuan, you have a bit of it there. But it's really, I felt like she got going in the fourth book, where she unleashed a lot of that stuff that maybe she felt as a young female author she wasn't allowed to write about back then. But thank goodness for her, because she was really a trailblazer. Yeah, Tahanu, thank you, Anita. Yeah.
And it's fascinating because Wizard of Earthsea, the first book, is, I think in America, seen very much as almost like children's fantasy.
Yeah, it's categorized. I mean, because it was released that way, I think.
But as you go along, it's certainly become, not that the writing, I think, gets any more difficult, but I think thematically, some of the stuff that Le Guin starts exploring becomes deemed more adult, because it does start dealing, I think, with some more complex themes.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. Are there any nonfiction books you refer back to? Thank you, Jaxel, for fantasy themes. And it's funny, with my own writing, I've talked about my books being the shortest pitch I have is that the Adan trilogy is Beowulf meets Buddhism. By which really what I mean is, I think what I'm looking at is, of course, I think a lot of authors would say that they're looking at mortality, that they're looking at loss, that they're looking at pain and suffering and things like that, things that we go through as human beings. But how do we respond to that? And so I hope that what I'm doing as well is exploring beauty and hope and connection, because in so many ways, I think those are responses to mortality. And you can see that in Beowulf, you can see that in Buddhism. And these are both you have a strong recognition of our ephemeralness, that life is fleeting, that we're not going to be around forever. Our friends will be gone one day, our family, our possessions, and we ourselves will be gone one day. And that's just
apart from me, I'm going to last. I'm immortal. I'm not going anywhere.
Well, dragons are very long-lived. That is true. I hear they live several hundred years. especially the more critical ones. Yeah, so how do we respond to this? And I think the answers are different from tradition to tradition, where in something like Beowulf, you see, well, you're not going to be around forever, so do great deeds so that your name will live on a little bit longer and the bards will sing about you and that sort of thing, right? Buddhism is a bit different. Both recognize how ephemeral life is, how fleeting it is. But Buddhism says, well, actually, yes, first accept that you are fleeting, that you're ephemeral, but also accept that you're connected, that you're part of this web of life. And in a sense, even when your individual self is no longer around, you will have a presence in the universe because you are part of it, right? So these are things that I'm exploring in my book. I guess that's my long answer to your question, that there's a bit of, I think, philosophy in there, because the whole background, the whole context of it is a holy war. And one answer trying to impose itself over other answers is usually, and what are the motives behind that? Why do people of one tradition try to impose their answer on other people? What's going on there psychologically and politically? So that's something I hope that I'm exploring in there a little bit. Yeah. And so it's EDAN, Pete. Yeah. EDAN. Yeah. So yes, good. I'm glad I could help you out with the existential dread there, Eugene. I mean, hopefully, I think a lot of times in fantasy, we do deal with like a Wizard of Earthsea, which is really not YA in my opinion. I think it's a wonderful book for examining acceptance of death. You see that all over the place. Even books that we consider to be grimdark. Okay, I also think that they're an important exploration, a very important exploration of our response to life and where we find meaning in life, and if we find meaning in life. Because to me, a lot of grimdark is really the modern sort of existential response to the fact that we often feel that we're alienated and disconnected. And how do you get meaning out of a universe that has no intrinsic meaning, right? So I think that's going to be.
But if nothing in the universe has any meaning, then the only thing that has meaning is how you act.
Exactly. Yeah. So you carve meaning, and that's the essence of existentialism. And I think you do see that a lot in grimdark. You do see that a lot. That the exploration of that is pretty awesome. So yeah, a couple of questions about this again. So yes, March 21st is the release for both the paperback and the ebook. However, there will be probably a couple weeks before March 21st where you can pre-order the ebook, but ebook only, because Amazon KDP does not allow pre-orders on paperbacks for some weird reason. I don't know why. So when you publish that way, I know you'll find other books with pre-orders that are paperback, but if you publish through KDP, that's how it works, apparently. So yeah. So back to, whoops, I don't know what I'm doing here. Yes, exactly right, Joanna. That is exactly right. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, that's my approach to AP. We never get snarky, do we? Yeah.
No, of course not. I've never. See, the thing is, your channel is positive and wonderful, and then there's, we don't mention anything about AP because the snark and sarcasm on his channel.
I don't know if I would call it snark, but maybe you feel the tug towards snark, but I think you valiantly resist it most of the time, AP. But thank you so much, Four Corners of the Page. I really appreciate that. And Polly's asking, yes, so anywhere there's Amazon, you'll be able to order it. Going back to my books, you'll be able to order it, and you will also be able to order if you don't like Amazon or it's not available to you. I'm also publishing through Ingram Spark, so your local bookstore should have the ability to order it from there. So yeah, as well as libraries. And yes, Angela, I do have poetry. Yes. So all you people out there who, while reading Lord of the Rings, skip the poems, I'm sure you're not going to want to skip my poems because they're just cool, right, AP?
Yeah, just the poems are great.
Thank you for that ringing endorsement. No, but my poems, okay, so there's a lot of Old English. Surprise, I get to say Beowulf every live stream. So Beowulf is an important inspiration for me. And the fact of the matter is, I have some very, let's say, Old English inspired poems in there. I have a character who is a bard, although the word for bard in Old English is shop. It's spelled S-C-O-P. Don't let anyone ever say scop, because that is not how it's pronounced. It's shop. And that simply means shaper, somebody who shapes, who creates. And that's what ancient poets were. They were creators in the sense that, like the Tolkien sub-creator sense, right? They conjure worlds for us. So that's what I'm doing here with the Old English poetry, which I hope people will like. I think it's cool. So
As much as I was making fun there, Philip, I
yes.
did enjoy the poetry. It does add to the book, and like this is for those people who have read The Sandman. So DC's The Sandman, and it was adapted into a Netflix show. But one of the names for Morpheus, for Dream, is Lord Shaper.
Yes,
because it's, and one of the things that Morpheus controls in the dreaming is this sort of eternal infinite library where every story ever told, every story ever thought of is on those shelves in books, because story and dream are so intrinsically linked. And it was interesting you were talking about show, because one of the other words wasn't it scald?
That's Norse. Yeah. So Skald is a Norse poet. Yeah.
But you know, if you look through history, troubadour, bard, there have always been traveling storytellers, and through stories gave life to concepts, brought the world to life, brought different places to life, give us new ways of understanding and experiencing things.
Yeah.
And it's I have to admit, I'm so pleased and proud and grateful that I got to read your book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm also pleased and grateful that you read my book. So we have a question. Will it have Norse? Yes, there is Norse influence. There is Celtic influence, because I was once pretty fluent in Welsh, actually. Not Irish. I'm sorry, AP. I know you don't really speak Irish that well yourself either. So
Nope.
Yeah. But I would love to one day learn Irish. That would be awesome. And there's some South Asian influence, because I also speak Nepali and lived in Nepal. So questions. I haven't figured out Jonathan signed copies yet. I'm going to work on that. I'm not sure how authors handle that, but I'm looking into that. And we have oh, this is cool. I love this question. How does one learn a dead language? So Jarl, you have to talk to dead people. That's a joke. Sorry. So yes, the way I went about it was through back. So I'm aging myself here. Cassette tapes, that sort of thing. When I was in college in the early '90s, I had cassette tapes, and I learned how to pronounce that way. How do we know how Old English was pronounced? That's an interesting question, because that's something that people have to sort of piece together. And you can sort of kind of figure out things by the way things rhyme, if there's rhyme, or there actually are books on how to pronounce Latin in Old English. So we know, if you know how Latin is pronounced, and you have a book in Old English about this letter is pronounced like our letter this, then you have a kind of like a guidebook on how to pronounce Old English. So there are various ways that scholars have put together pretty reliably, I think, how Old English sounded, which, something like "What we garden in year dagum theud kuning afrim jafrunan who da atherlingus ellen fremedon." That's what Old English sounded like. So that's English like 1,000 years ago. Pretty damn cool, eh?
And there are scholars. I've actually seen a couple of YouTube channels or YouTube videos where they've gone back and they've been experts in how, say, Elizabethan English sounded. and
Yes. Oh, it's fun.
they will do Shakespeare with an Elizabethan pronunciation as opposed to a modern English pronunciation. And you go,
Yeah.
oh, how could it have changed that much? And there was when was the Great Vowel Shift?
The Great Vowel Shift was probably getting underway in about 1500 or so. Yeah.
But it's so much about how accents have changed over time, how we stress and unstress things, and just regional accents, how things have shifted. And it's an absolutely fascinating process because obviously, like you and I, we would look at the same sentence and yet we would pronounce it differently. And even when we were having a look at some of the poetry in, I think it was in the Malazan stuff, trying to work out stressed and unstressed syllables.
Yeah.
And like ordinarily, you look at it, go, oh yeah, that's all fine. But every once in a while, there would be a word that because of pronunciation, because of accent, we actually don't stress it the same way. Or it's a half rhyme for me and a full rhyme for you, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that is really interesting. When you go back and you look at, say, metaphysical poetry, the metaphysicals.
Yeah.
Looking at a lot of those things, and you go, that's meant to be a rhyme.
Yeah.
Because I can see the rhyme scheme.
In Shakespeare. Yeah.
And it's so weird because then when you go, is it meant to be a rhyme or is it meant to be a half rhyme? Is it meant to stand out? And then you start playing around with it, and we forget that even though it was written down, the sound of it has changed, and a lot of poetry was obviously meant to be read aloud. It was meant to be experienced as something you heard, and again with a lot of the epic poetry, that was the show up would perform it for people.
Right. So a good example of that change in pronunciation, even from Shakespeare's English, which by the way is modern English, it's early modern English, but the famous sonnet, if this be error and upon me proved, I never writ nor no man ever loved, actually in Elizabethan times would have been something, they sounded like pirates back then. So if this be error and upon me proved, I never writ nor no man ever loved. So the word proved would have been pronounced proved, and it would have rhymed with loved perfectly in Shakespeare's time. So that's a lot of fun. That is cool stuff for me. And you mentioned the Great Vowel Shift. It's everybody. That's the Great Vowel Shift, not the Great Bowel Shift. Just to be clear.
That happens after Taco Tuesday.
So sorry about the dad jokes, guys. We can't resist. But the Great Vowel Shift did happen right around 1500 or so, when in English, this is one of the reasons why English is such a messed up language. It is one of the reasons. There are others. The values of the vowels changed in English. So they used to be the same as the continental European languages. So, in Spanish or in French or in German or whatever, that vowel that we pronounce E is A, right? And the long form. And the I, what we say I is E, right? And so on and so forth. The A is an ah. So what happened was in English, what was E, which we now say I for, shifted to I and left the E space vacant. So the vowel that was A became an E sound, and then the vowel that was an ah became an A sound. So we had that shift in the vowels. So yeah, it's just one of the things. And unfortunately for kids everywhere who live in English-speaking countries, it happened right when spelling was being standardized. So you have words written like Knight, which once upon a time were actually pronounced knicht, and now are pronounced night. What do we need the K for? What do we need the GH for? Well, geez, too bad.
To get higher points in Scrabble.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of how it was. Yeah.
But and again, I think one of the things, because we talk about fantasy a lot, people sometimes get very bent out of shape about how to pronounce certain things in from fantasy books. Like we talk about the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and people going, is that how you say Malazan correctly, or Malazan, or where do you put the emphasis on that?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's the written form, and as long as it's making sense in your head, then don't worry about it. You had the unfortunate experience of seeing how my brain had difficulty with certain names in your book.
Yes.
And therefore renamed them. and I let you know what some of those names were.
Yeah, they were creative. They were creative. They were sort of tended in a certain direction, but I appreciated the renaming. One of the fun things. So, I mean, it is an experience to have your book developmentally edited by AP, I must say, because there were so many comments that made me laugh while I was reading his suggestions, his editorial suggestions. It's like a glimpse into the brain of AP. It was a lot of fun for me to read these, and of course, I took a whole bunch of these suggestions and made the book better too. But it was fun to be able to do it while laughing. So yeah. But,
Well, I'm glad it was a relatively painless process.
here we have a birthday. Happy birthday, Giovanni. Yay.
Oh, happy birthday.
Everybody say hello, happy birthday to Giovanni in the chat. Yay. Yep. Oh gosh. That would be fun. Well, you know, there is, I think many of you know this already, but there actually is already a fictional character that is pretty much pretty much a biographical sketch of AP. And that was a character created by Steven Erikson as, in his novellas, the Boccaline and Corbel Broach novellas. So you must read those if you want to see the character that is basically AP put in a fantasy setting. And that character's name is Apto Cannavalian, right, AP?
I hate you.
Oh dear. So, I mean, you have to admit, Steven Erikson had some insights there.
He was like wildly inaccurate, like nothing like me at all. I don't. It was closer to describing you, Philip. Like that's
me.
Yeah, you're
honest, Philip. You think? It sort of sounds like Honest Iago, right? Yeah. No, I mean, I think it was a brilliant. There must be someone in the chat who has read these. Crackpot Trail is where Apto Cannavalian is introduced. That's the Boccaline and Corbel Broach novella, Crackpot Trail. Everybody go read it. It's just brilliant. It's so cool, and you'll have an excellent sense for the true inner AP, I think, after reading reading it.
It was weird in that someone did remark one time that once they had found out that the character had been very loosely inspired by me, based on me, like tangentially connected, they went back and reread some of those lines with my accent.
Oh, that's so funny. That is so funny. Yes, there is a Boccaline and Corbel Broach novella that is not among the published ones. It's one that I think Steven Erikson shared it on his Facebook. But there is a Joe Abercrombie character that is in that one. Okay, so it is published.
On the Dark of Evil Overlords.
Okay, it hasn't been published among the collected ones yet, though. I guess, is that right?
No, Tor hasn't published it in the collected edition.
Okay, but you can get it. It's available if you go on Amazon or whatever, I guess. So yeah, there is a Joe Abercrombie character. Do you remember what he names the Joe Abercrombie character, or should we let people figure it out? I think it's pretty obvious.
It's relatively obvious.
Yeah. Okay. So, yep, here it is. Yeah, as it should be. Yes. So we do have some Crackpot Trails fans, AP, which basically I interpret as they're fans of you.
No, they're fans of a modern version of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, very much so.
And
Mitch has got it right here too. I think pretty well. Yeah. And funny enough, Apto Cannavalian is what is he? Oh, a critic. Huh. Isn't that funny? What a coincidence that you're a critical dragon.
I
beer. Yeah. So that's how it is. Oh yeah.
Uh,
Naming. Yeah.
and we've talked about this before. It's like
Yeah.
when people pointed out, it was like there were two characters in Malazan called Pearl. It's like, oh, they used the same name twice. And it's like, I remember there were how many, 3 or 4 people in my primary school class who were called Paul. About 2 or 3 Peters.
Any
You know,
Marys? Any Marys? Peter, Paul, and Mary? Sorry. I know there were some Marys there.
but it's very, very strange because this is when we think about narrative, and people always go, "Oh, I want it to be more realistic." We one of the modern sort of obsessions is this idea of realism, and we forget that fiction is a conceit. It is artificial, and one of the things that we like is everyone is uniquely named. That you don't have the realism of a bunch of people with the same or very similar sounding names.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
like
true.
Pearl and Pearl, like completely different.
Yeah.
But it's so strange that it's something that we come to expect in fiction, that no one's name is too similar to anyone else's name. And even then in fantasy, the number of people who are like Madonna and Prince, in that they only have one name,
Yeah.
and yet these are like, everyone is like that.
Well,
And
Prince actually has a bunch of names because he's the artist formerly known as Prince.
Yes, and Squiggle and Symbol or whatever the thing was.
Squiggle. Yeah. Okay.
But we have this this really weird thing that we want a naming convention that seems to fit with how we would understand it, but everyone to have unique names, and then for the different cultures to have different names the way that we would have different names and naming conventions in different cultures, despite the fact you and I come from very different cultures, but I know people called Philip from this part of the world.
Really? Are they as handsome and intelligent as I am?
No, they are not the same as you. They are, in fact, handsome and intelligent.
Oh. Oh no. Yeah. Well, so okay, we're losing Angela. So lovely to see you. You have a life outside of BookTube, really? Wow. I sure don't. Take care now. So yeah, it's interesting because with my own writing, it was something I thought about a fair amount, being aware that it gets hard for readers to remember names if they're from a very, if they don't sound familiar, and that can be a bit of a barrier sometimes while reading fantasy. And there are lots of funny memes and stuff about fantasy character names and that sort of thing, and people just pronouncing them like, so when you just kind of just gloss over the name every time you see it, you gotta recognize it visually, but you never really say the name. And a lot of my names are, of course, inspired from Old English and Old Norse and even the Celtic ones and the South Asian inspired ones. So there are a lot of exotic sounding names for modern people in my books. And I do kind of think, well, there's a part of me that worries about that a little bit. But then I think fantasy readers are used to names that are weird and kind of rolling with it. So that's where I ended up.
And that's actually, it's an interesting point about why reading science fiction and fantasy is, I think, a great education. So much of what we understand through context. And with science fiction and fantasy, because of the movement away from a mimetic reality into something that can only be understood through clues in the text. Now, some of it is very overt, and we are told. There's sometimes direct exposition about something. But a lot of the time, it's the dropping of names and hints and concepts that we build up an understanding of over time. And this is a technique that we see in science fiction and fantasy all the time, and yet it is so useful when it comes to the real world. when you're reading or experiencing something, the ability to pick up context clues and understand from context and extrapolate from that. Which, you know, one of the downsides of some realist fiction is this focus on the assumptions of the base level reality being the mimetic reality, but from a particular perspective, which is an assumed base norm, that we take that and then we never explore it, and it's taken as a given. And then when something deviates from it, the author feels the need to explain, because it's deviated from that and doesn't trust that a reader can pick up through context how something has shifted. Whereas, you know, that is something that's so common in science fiction and fantasy. The assumption that, yes, readers will pick up from context, that breadcrumbs here and there will create the enough information for them to assemble the full picture.
Yeah.
And science fiction and fantasy really train you to do that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Mick Scarfield, you're absolutely right. If you've ever read the sagas, half the characters are named Thor something or other. And there's just a lot of repeated names. And because
Thor Thorson?
Yeah, Thor Thorson. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's definitely a reflection of the fact that a lot of those sagas are about real people. And in the real world, a lot of us have the same name. Yeah. So, and here's a nice comment from Camp K. And that is really wonderful to hear. I think, AP, we love it when we hear people say something like that, don't we? Yeah.
I love it when people express their love for a series, particularly when it's like, I find this spoke to me. That is the beauty and power of literature. And it doesn't matter if the series that you love is not the same as the series that I love, or the different series that I love. What matters is that we are passionate. We get something from it. And everyone knows there are certain well-known works and authors whose works I don't particularly enjoy as much as others.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that they are bad, but it is so nice to hear people celebrate the things that they love, and to do that without the need to put down other series or other works that other people may love just as much. And it is so nice to, particularly in this day and age, with so many competing interests, that the interest in books, in literature, continues to thrive and find new audiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Very well said. Yeah. That's kind of sad. Nicholas, you know, you do get your occasional characters like Kyle, you know, famously. We were talking about Kyle earlier a little bit in the chat.
And to be fair, there are quite a few satanic figures that will have the name Nick. Or
that's true. You do have the satanic ones there, Nicholas. I don't know if that's any consolation or not.
And if Santa is in a story about Saint Nicholas, so you know that's going to be there.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of Satan, look who's here.
Hi, Steve.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We were just talking about the biographical sketch that you made of AP in Crackpot Trail.
And how inaccurate it was, and how it wasn't like me at all.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure every time that Apto slips away, there's some smoke and brimstone there, right? Yeah, that's what's going on there. For sure.
You are an evil, evil man. And you can decide whether I'm talking to Philip or Steve with that.
So that's awesome. Oh, and then Paul here. Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf. And I'm so glad that you like that edition. I think it definitely captures for me the poetry of the Old English in a modern translation in a way that most translations lose. And it's hard. I mean, translating is a hard business. You're going to lose something. You're going to lose fidelity to the meaning, or you're going to lose the aesthetic or something. You can't get it all. And I would say that Heaney comes the closest I've ever seen to anyone achieving it all. So, yeah.
What did you think of the use of Ulster Scots in it for some of the terminology?
I was wondering how you would feel about that because, of course, you're from that neck of the woods. So for most of us, Ulster Scots in a translation of Beowulf is going to feel exotic and old and but for you, those are words, right? That would sound very modern. Yeah.
Well, not anything but common. Some of them would be common. Just depending on whereabouts you live in.
That's the word so not a biography, expose. That's the word I actually was groping for. So yeah, expose. Yeah.
Oh, I trust you to be groping for things. Yet, but why am I friends with you people? It's just a constant abuse.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic.
But this takes us actually talking about, say, Ulster Scots and how over here, though a number of those words would be far more common, and you would just read and
Right.
instinctively what they are because you heard them in the street.
Right.
This happens a lot with fantasy, where you have, say, someone using 19th century British vernacular.
Yeah.
So an American author using 19th century British vernacular, going, this is going to sound old and archaic. But a lot of that vernacular from the 19th century actually still is used in certain context, or maybe the context has shifted and changed. Or someone drawing from, say, Germanic elements. And so someone who is actually from that part of the world looking at it going, but that's not foreign, that's not strange, that's actually quite natural. And we see this quite a lot because there's an assumption of audience, but also like the author writing in part to an assumed audience, and you cannot write to every single audience.
Right.
That if you include Irish names, for instance, because you've created a Celtic-inspired fantasy world and use a lot of Irish names, there will be a lot of people will find those Irish names strange and startling and very fantasy sounding, very different, very weird.
Yeah.
And I'm going, yeah, I know a Siobhan and a Saoirse and a Saoirse.
Yeah.
Like,
this is great news, actually, Jay. I'm so glad to hear that you lost the challenge because with this being the case, I'm pretty sure we're going to be seeing some of the best produced Malazan videos on YouTube pretty soon. Because if you guys don't know Jay from Captured in Words, I think most of you do. But if you don't, he produces some really fantastic looking videos. Just the production value is tremendous. But I'm so happy and I'm so looking forward to hearing, Jay, what you think about Malazan. I don't know if Steve is still around in the chat or not, but if he is, that's I think that's great news as well for him. So awesome. Looking forward to hearing all about your thoughts.
See, and this would be the thing. Like, just leave that comment up for a second.
Oh, there's Steve. By the way, so if you don't know, Steve London is Steven Erickson. So yeah. I can just hear him saying that. So going back to that comment. Okay, here it is.
Yeah. But it's, I said if I'd lost, I'd start Malazan.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the lawyer in me is going, yeah. So you read the first chapter and go, there you go. I fulfilled my part of it. I said I'd start it. I never said that I'd finish reading it.
See, now we know why you're Apto-Calamalian, you know.
No, and these would be lessons taught to us by the genie stories, the wish stories in fantasy. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful the bargain that you strike. How you say it, exactly what you've agreed to. That's the important thing.
I see. Well, I'm pretty sure that Apto went to law school. I'm pretty sure about that. Yeah.
But that's fantasy. It's an experience. It's an education. This
is true. It is indeed. So here's Mick Garfield. As a mythology religion guy with the hard-hitting questions. Oh, I love your questions, Mick Garfield. Which Buddhism have you mixed, Beowulf? I wouldn't say there's a particular type of Buddhism. I'm not really an expert on Buddhism like I am at least I can claim to be somewhat of an expert in Old English poetry. It's just more of a general philosophical Buddhism, I think. And I've read a few introductions to it, and I've lived in South Asia, obviously. So I've been able to imbibe some things about Buddhism by living in Nepal. And of course, it's a primarily Hindu country, but there's a lot of Buddhists there too. I think it's about 80% Hindu and somewhere close to 20% Buddhist. So, and the two tend to get very mixed over there. They're not shy about mixing these things up. I mean, for them, you go to a temple that's supposed to be a Hindu temple, you'll see statues of the Buddha, or if you go to a Buddhist temple, you'll see Indra or Ganesh hanging out there. So they're very generous when it comes to that sort of thing. Right? And that's something I enjoy a lot. So yeah, I don't have a particular brand of Buddhism that I'm specifically reaching from. So what else? Do we have any other questions here? Do I plan on learning any more languages? There's so many. I mentioned I'd love to learn Irish. I'd love to go to Iceland someday and get really good at Old Norse or even modern Icelandic, which is not. It has changed since 1000 AD, but not as much as some languages like English. So I tortured you guys with some English from 1,000 years ago. Icelandic hasn't changed as much. There are so many. I'd love to learn Sanskrit, actually. Sanskrit is really cool. So Matt, that's totally right. Yeah, so Matt is a Buddhist and went to Nepal and probably got confused because of how they just embrace everything over there. They really do. That's one of the things I love about that part of the world. They really embrace everything.
Like a New York hot dog, one with everything.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, I like the metaphor, maybe. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Devanagari script. So modern Nepali uses the same script as the Sanskrit, the Devanagari script. Which is pretty cool. And then, not that I can read Nepali really very well. I've taken a few attempts at learning to read, but I'm pretty much illiterate. I can just speak it. So I'm glad you enjoyed the Old English, Jarl. I think it's cool too. So it makes me really popular at parties when I break out the Old English. So, see, now this is cool. Anita's saying they had to learn Sanskrit in high school. How cool is that?
That is actually really cool.
Yeah.
But I am just going to disappear for a second. I realize I need to get another drink.
Go for it. Yes, there's two of us.
I will be back momentarily. Sorry, my friend.
So here's a question from Glenn responding to Matthias. And yeah, I think in many respects, Buddhism was kind of sort of like Protestantism broke off of Catholicism, I guess. So Buddhism in that sense did develop out of Hinduism. And I'm talking about this like I know. But yeah, that's my impression. So yeah, around 500 BC or so, this guy who grew up in a very Hindu context in what is actually, he was born in what is now Nepal, in the southern part of Nepal. That's a good idea. But I think that's a pretty fair summary. Let's talk about AP now. So what do we want to say about AP? Okay, let's give us the dirt on AP while he's not there, while he's getting his drink. Whatever is he really doing? I don't know. What do you think he's actually doing? Is he getting his drink? What else could he be up to there? I don't know. But I'm sure someone in the chat would have a good idea about that. Here we go. I do miss the ponytail, and Paul actually had I don't know, did we ever find out who did that? So somebody created a YouTube identity that was named AP's Missing Ponytail. And I always sort of assumed that it must have been Paul. But I don't know. Do you guys, I haven't seen AP's Missing Ponytail in a long time, so I can't be sure who it was, but he used to make AP's Missing Ponytail. He used to make YouTube comments every once in a while. So I miss the ponytail very much. Yeah. And so true, right? Who's got the best beard? Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. Thank you, Eric. Yours is pretty awesome there too, actually. Yeah, it's true. Actually, he just puts books in the background to look smart. Those aren't really his books. Yeah. Oh, there is. Shh. We weren't talking about you.
What fake AP background? He's in a pub.
so, so we were just discussing how we miss your ponytail. Whoops, no, not that one. This one. How we miss your ponytail. Are you going to grow the ponytail back?
I don't know. Well, to be honest, I was actually thinking to get my hair cut again because it's starting to get long.
It is getting long there, yes. But that's a look. I think that's actually a pretty fashionable look these days. I noticed my students, because I can stay cool and hip because I teach at a college. So I see all my students in what the current fashions are. And I believe that your hairdo is currently in fashion.
Is this one of those circumstances whereby because fashion is cyclical, that I have been out of fashion for so long, it has come back into fashion?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I just heard today that bell bottoms are coming back. So
no.
Time to break out your plaid bell bottoms, AP.
No. Actually, I'm gonna say no. I wasn't the generation that had bell bottoms. That was your generation.
That was my generation. I actually did own plaid bell bottoms in the 70s and wore them. Yes.
Wow.
This is the truth. Yeah. Sorry to give you all that image, everybody. So do I have a word page count? Yes, I do, for the Way of Idan. I can tell you that. So it comes to, with the acknowledgments and the map and everything before the actual story starts, it's 462 pages, but it's 450 pages as a trade paperback. So not a mass market, but a trade paperback. So that's pretty manageable size, I think, right, everybody? That's not too much of a tome. Yeah. And in terms of word count, it's about 165,000 words, which is really that's what you really want to hear, is the word count. That's the more true measure.
165,000? I thought I told you needed 164,995.
I just couldn't get those 5 words out. I tried so hard. Oh, yeah. You could do a top knot, AP. So, oh, yeah. There we go. There it is. Rocking the top. I think that's also in fashion right now. Like if you were to actually tie that off, I think that would be cool. You would look cool. Yeah.
No, Philip, I will never look cool. That is, you could dress me in the trendiest clothes, have the world's top stylists fix it. I will never look cool.
Well, there's 2 of us. So
take care, everyone.
So you're asking about the audiobook narration. Yes, that's going to be a lot of fun. So those of you who don't know, Alan from the Library of Alexandria is going to be doing my audiobooks for me, and I'm actually really excited about that. So I think he might have been talking about your top knot. We also had some commentary from elsewhere. That's a no. Oh dear.
Eloquent as always, Steve. Eloquent.
What was I talking about? We were talking about something intelligent. What was it?
I think it's gotten away from us, Philip.
I feel like there was something there, but anyway.
Oh, you were talking about the audiobook and Alan.
Oh, yes, of course. Alan and the audiobook. So yeah, Alan, that's not going to be till the summer though, because Alan is a busy fella. And so we're going to work on it slowly, but we're hoping for late summer for the audiobook release of book 1, The Way of Idan. So I will definitely keep you guys posted on that and anything that happens. Hardcover, I have no firm plans yet for the hardcover, so I will see how it goes. I have already spent a lot of dough on the paperback and ebook and all that. So if it goes well, then I really do want to do a hardcover, like maybe a special edition or something like that. I think that would be a lot of fun. So hopefully, if it goes well, we can do something like that. And there's Tommy. Tommy recently interviewed me. He's doing some really cool work on his blog, interviewing all kinds of folks, authors, and also some booktubers and stuff. Yeah, I was really lucky to have him interview me. That was a lot of fun. And oh, AP, you got some support here. Oh, both of us actually. Yeah. Nice. Okay, well, that's very kind of you, Rob. We appreciate it.
See, I think that's probably just flattering. He said both of us, and clearly he wants something.
Yeah. Well, anyway. Oh yeah. Okay. Actually, I'm willing to talk about that. So it's expensive. It really is. Okay, let's put it this way. There are ways, and there probably are a couple other self-published authors in the chat as well who could. There's one who could talk about this and maybe have slightly different numbers. But let's do the math. AP, you and I are so good at math. Let's do the math. So let's just say we have 10. Each of us has 10 of these, so we can get all the way up to 20. No, yeah, 20. Yeah. So you got your book done. You think you're done and you've written a really, really great book. You've gone over it many times. You've had your friends read it. You've had your relatives, your whatever, anybody you can get to read it to give you feedback. You need to get feedback, honestly, ideally from an editor, somebody like this guy, and a developmental editor. There's also a copy editor. Those are two different functions. Some people will do both, but any kind of editing you do is going to cost thousands of dollars if you get it done professionally, which, if you can afford, do it. If you want to hire an artist for your book cover, that's going to run you probably a couple thousand. If you have somebody do your book cover design, that's a different thing. That's going to run you maybe, another 1,000 or so. So this is adding up really fast. You have small fees related to publishing on sites or with venues like Ingram Spark. You have all kinds of other things. I did the math once. I think you could easily spend around $10,000 to publish one book, to self-publish one book. You could easily spend $10,000. So it depends, where you want to skimp and all of that. But to produce a really great looking, well edited, really compelling self-published book, which is doable, but I think you should be looking at somewhere in the ballpark of $10,000. And somebody feel free to disagree with me if you want to in the chat.
One thing I'll add about editing is there are different types of editing, as you pointed out: developmental editing, line editing, copy editing. There's a whole bunch of things. But before engaging anyone, it's something I try to encourage everyone to do, which is go and have a look at the actual established professional site. So the Editorial Freelancers Association, the EFA, is the American sort of site for freelance editors. That has a breakdown of the sort of the industry standard rates, and by looking at those, you will get a ballpark for how much editing your novel is going to be. You'll get a ballpark. Now, every editor will be a variant on that. They'll have, and every project is unique, and you work with someone to try and find something that is mutually acceptable. But when you're engaging a professional editor, it's much like engaging a professional lawyer. Like, you go to someone for legal advice and you pay for a professional. Whereas you can go and get your friend to do it, and they might end up, giving you the same advice. But if you go to a professional, that's why you're paying them. Editing is not cheap. There are people who offer wild discounts. There are people who do it very, very cheaply. If you can find those people and it works for you, then go for it. But I know one of the reasons why I always refer to the EFA website, there's a UK equivalent and an Irish equivalent. And I actually have, I think in the About section of my my YouTube channel, I actually link to the 3 of them so
Yeah.
that people get an honest idea of how much editing actually costs. Because sometimes the reality of the situation can be a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah, the cartographers are actually almost as expensive as the editors. It's true.
Well, it's that whole expedition you had to fund. You know, you had to get the ship, you had to get the hardtack and the flour, and then you know, put the weevils in it for the genuine experience.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and had to get those Viking ships too. You know how expensive those are to rent, man. Oh, so yeah.
But about like editing, and as you pointed out, you had gone through your text, your manuscript multiple times before you sent it to me.
Yep.
And you know that's the big thing. People, first of all, anyone who finishes writing a novel, you have my admiration and respect. I think that is an achievement to write down and get it out an entire novel. That is an achievement.
Yeah, it is.
Going through and polishing it so it becomes much more cohesive and basically more professional. That is another achievement. But as much as you try to do it, sometimes authors are too close to their own work, particularly if you've gone through it multiple times. And that's why a fresh pair of eyes is useful.
Yep. Editing yeah.
And so that's what you're essentially paying for, is a fresh pair of eyes, someone who understands what it is that you're trying to do, someone who is going to be sympathetic to helping you achieve the best for your work. Not change it according to what they want, not change it according to what anyone thinks the market wants, but to try and help you get the best version of your story.
Yeah. That is well said. So Christopher asks, is it cost efficient for me to release all my books in 1 year? Probably not. The real reason I'm releasing all my books in 1 year is the primary consideration there is I want to give my readers the best possible experience. And who likes to wait for a year or 2 years for now any A Song of Ice and Fire fans out there, right? You know, any
low blow, Philip.
Any King Killer Chronicle fans out there? How does it feel waiting for
hang on a sec. I would like everyone to note, look how mean he is being. He is being incredibly mean. This is the true nefarious
I'm just being nice.
Unmasked at last.
But I'm being nice to my readers because I figure, who wants to wait all those years for the next book? Now, I figure if you like the first book, you would probably want to read the second book as soon as possible. And 3 months is about as quick as I can get the next book out. So I'm just trying to deliver the best possible experience for my readers. So yeah, and I think it's also true. So I'm also thinking a little bit about people being willing, because I think a lot of I was joking about poor George R. R. Martin, great writer, Patrick Rothfuss too. I love their writing. But I do feel that a lot of fantasy fans are a bit wary. And there's Scott Lynch too. Yeah. Again, I love Scott Lynch. I think The Gentleman Bastards is great stuff. But I think fantasy fans are a bit wary of unfinished series. So if I can promise you guys, I'm having all 3 books out in 1 year, and you won't have to wait, and I won't disappoint you by not putting out the 3rd book for a long extended period. I hope that pushes a little people to say, okay, a few people say, all right, I'm gonna buy this because I'm pretty sure books 2 and 3 are going to be out. And I've got them pretty much ready for you guys. So it's just a matter of getting the cover ready on books 2 and 3. So,
and you spread them over 2 tax years, so you're all.
I actually did it. I'm an idiot. It's all in 1 tax year, I think. So yeah. So yeah, that was the real motivation there. So yeah, I don't think Alan's going to do all 3 that soon. He's just going to do the first one for the. He will do all 3, but he's going to do the first one in the summer, and we'll see how we do. I think once he gets the hang of being a narrator, it'll go faster. There's going to be a learning curve there for just about anything is like that, I suppose. Yes, that's right. I mean, it really is more or less me trying to, it is marketing in the sense that, yeah, I hope more people will buy the book knowing that they're going to have books 2 and 3 in the near future. So in that sense, it is a marketing decision, but it is, yeah, if you want to think of it that way, AP knows how kind I am. So yeah.
You know, and the third book is out just in time for Christmas. So
that's right. I think it would be a fantastic Christmas present if you do Christmas. If not, birthdays, you know.
Birthdays, bar mitzvahs, you know, it's...
Yeah, you name it. Halloween, give one to every kid who comes to your house. So, although it is kind of adult fantasy, but you know, oh well. They'll grow up, right? They'll read it when they get older. So, yeah. So, yeah, you know, this is a good question. I think that the payoff for working on this is a good question for the authors in the chat too. So the payoff, how much payoff is there at a certain point? I think you have to know. I mean, there are certainly, and there's no one right way to do this. Obviously, Brandon Sanderson is famous for being very prolific. And I think AP, you've remarked before that he perfectly knows what he's doing. And if he wanted to take, 5 years to write a single book, he could refine it. There is a certain point beyond which there's not much return on that. Like, I think I probably was a little stupid or a little crazy to take as long as I have. Now, I didn't work on the books year round or anything like that. It was mostly in the summers, but the amount of return you get for doing the 20th draft, 20th revision of your book is less than, let's say, the 10th, right, AP?
Yeah, well, think back to when you were writing an essay. You did your first draft, and so you blurted it all out onto the page,
right?
And then you went through, and it was actually you went through with a fine-tooth comb and you tidied it all up. Now, you could go through it again, and each time that you go through it, you end up changing. Oh, well, I changed that sentence, I'll move that slightly, and the changes get smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right.
And it takes longer and longer and longer to find and try and refine what you're doing. And so you end up spending more and more time for less and less in return. So there is a cutoff point. There's a point where you go, the maximum amount of effort is giving me the minimal amount of return, or the minimum amount of effort is giving me the maximum amount of return. You try to balance that.
Yeah. And
everyone has a different threshold for it. But also every author has different circumstances. Some authors write on their commute. They write, I can't remember who it was, and they were saying that they wrote basically on their phone or something on their commute. And that's how they drafted. Other authors, they get up in the morning. David Gemmell famously said it was, he got up and by 8:30 was at his desk and he wrote until lunch. Then he had a break for lunch, and then he wrote until about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. Wow. And then finished. Wow. And then he went home and he had his dinner. And that was, he treated it as a day job, that he got up, he wrote, had lunch, wrote, went, and then ended for the day. And that's what he did every day. And that, Gemmell was incredibly prolific.
I don't think I could write that many hours in a day, honestly. I mean, that's tough. I get to a certain point and I realize, okay, I'm writing garbage now. I need to stop.
And the thing, as much as I love David Gemmell, there are characters and tropes and plot movements that get repeated across multiple books of his. There are certain things that he likes to do, that he likes to explore, that he likes to use, and you recognize them. Yeah. It's the same with R.A. Salvatore's Dritz books.
Sure.
There are certain things in that you go, that seems eerily familiar. But sometimes that familiarity is what you're actually going for. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Not everything has to be the Brothers Karamazov. Not everything has to be Crime and Punishment or Pride and Prejudice. But every author is different. Every author has a different process. Some authors are full-time. Some authors are part-time. Some authors have their day job. Then they have their home life and then are writing in the evening before they go to bed.
Or in the summers. Yeah. Hey, how about this comment, AP, from Jarl? Authors who can write huge, detailed bricks of books yearly are monsters. Hey, didn't Steven Erikson write big books every year?
Yeah, pretty much. And he is, in fact, a monster. I've met him.
Oops. Okay. Well, there was another comment here I was looking for. It was Rob asking me a question, which I thought I should answer. Ah, yes, here we go. Yeah, I actually have, beyond the trilogy, I have a standalone sequel, which even AP hasn't seen yet. I'm not quite ready to show it to AP. I need to go over it probably at least one more time myself. But it's a standalone sequel. It's set in the same world. It's called While Darkness Gathers.
I thought it was called Edan 2, The Electric Boogaloo.
I was considering that title.
We'll put a pin in that one, just in case, you know.
Yes, just in case. Maybe my next sequel. That'll be. I'll consider it. I'll put that one under consideration. So, yeah, I feel like it's okay to talk about this because I did. So those you can do master classes by famous authors, and I had a friend who did the James Patterson master class, and he pretty much admits that in the course of that he doesn't really write his own books anymore. That essentially he has people that work for him who write the book, and then he edits the book. I think that's how it works, which is kind of like it is a look. I guess it works for him. He's bringing home the bacon. I'm sure he's doing pretty well. Pretty big bank account anyway. But yeah, to me, I heard him talk about that, and I was like, that just seems so inimical to the whole spirit of what I think of as writing. But I don't know. What do you think about that, AP? About authors who have a factory system, people who work for them who write their books, and they just sort of edit a little bit and then slap their name on the book cover.
Well, again, like every circumstance is different, because I'm not aware of James Patterson's particular approach, but
Right.
Someone who comes up with a story outline and goes, here's the arc of the story, here are the characters, here's the setting, here are the different things that are going to be in it, the movements of it, and they map it all out and go, so you go fill in what you can, and then they give you the manuscript back, and then you go back through it and you basically rewrite it all, and you put the polish on it. That's writing and co-writing, and some people do that. Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett co-wrote Good Omens, where they were writing a scene or a section, then they sent it to the other person, and it went backwards and forwards, and they wrote and rewrote each other's sections over and over again. And so that's why the book is fairly seamless in terms of its tone and consistency throughout. That it's very difficult to pick up. You go, oh, that sentence was definitely Terry Pratchett wrote that, or that sentence was definitely Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
And they have both their names on the cover because they both wrote it. There are different approaches and styles. My personal preference for things like this, if someone goes, yeah, go and write the book, and then because I have the name, I'll put my name on it, and I'll go make sure that it fits with my brand. That's not being an author. That's marketing. That's branding.
I guess. I mean, it works for some people, though.
But that's the world that we live in. We live in a world where you have the entire range of commodification of art and literature, from the mass-produced stuff at the very, very bottom all the way up to high-end specialist and everything in between. That it's a big world out there, and there's not any one way to do things. Yeah,
true. So Daniel, I think that's a great question. It's a really tough one. I remember when I was a kid and I knew that I wanted to be a writer because I read Tolkien and wanted to do what Tolkien did. And in 8th grade, I had this chance to meet a writer, because in our school, I don't know if they do that with people anymore, but maybe the times don't allow it. But they all asked us at school what we wanted maybe to do for a career. And, if you said, I want to be a police officer, they would pair you up with a police officer for the day. Or if you said, I want to be a firefighter, you'd get to, or a doctor, whatever, you'd spend the day with that person learning about their job. So I said, I want to be a writer. And I was in rural Vermont and they had to find a writer for me. So they did find one, actually, a guy named David Budbill, who was actually quite local near where I lived. He's no longer alive, but he was very kind to spend time with me and tell me about being a writer. He's a playwright and he did poetry. I think he wrote some novels too. But super nice guy. But I remember very distinctly, one of the first things he told me was, it's wonderful you want to be a writer, but you probably want to think about a day job or some means of support, unless you think you're going to have someone else helping you out with this.
Yeah, win the lottery. If you win the lottery, then it's all fine.
Yeah, I mean, even people that we think of as pretty successful authors, a lot of them have to have some other means of support because it's just not, for most writers, a very lucrative profession. Yes, you have your J.K. Rowlings and your Stephen Kings and so on and so forth, or your James Pattersons who can hire an army of writers or whatever. But most writers, even ones that we consider pretty successful, can't survive on just their writing. So it probably is sound advice, I think. And again, anyone out there who's a writer, feel free to disagree with me, but it's probably sound advice to have something. Now, as far as being a professor and a writer, keep in mind that you're using a lot of the same parts of your brain for those activities. So for my day job, I read a lot and I write a lot. And then for my passion, my hobby, I read a lot and I write a lot. So it might be worth considering, even something where you're using a different part of yourself, right? I don't know what that would be for you, but you might want to think of it in those terms. It's just where you have the energy to write after a long day of work because you haven't been using that part of your brain so much. But that's also, academia is I don't know what your friend is thinking about going into as a professor, but it is not the easiest place to find a full-time job. So then we can get into, a lot of people in academia are just squeaking by as what we call adjuncts. It's not really a great way to make a living, and it's tough. AP,
on average, an adjunct makes below poverty wages.
Way below. I mean, what they get paid doesn't even pay for like the gas they have to put in their car to get to the college. I mean, it's that bad. So yeah, I would think twice. Maybe 10 years ago, I still would have advised people to look into an academic career. I'm not so sure now. It's not, you have to, if you really love it, if you're passionate about your scholarship and or teaching, then yes, go for it. But you better really love it because there are a lot of obstacles and not a lot of monetary rewards for it. So yeah, it's tough. But yeah, I mean, I just wish your friend the best there in pursuing that. It's tough. I mean, as much as trying to be a writer is not maybe the best way to get rich, being an academic is a guaranteed way not to be rich. So, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know how that works. I mean, I'd love to find out, but in terms of the finances of being a writer. So, yeah, I haven't read that.
But Terry Pratchett was a phenomenal author, like a once in a generation kind of author. The pointed satire underlying so much of the fantasy that he was writing, and he disguised so much with humor, and yet you can see the anger at social injustice and inequality coming through. Yeah. I think you had mentioned Alan earlier on, like he's a big fan of Terry Pratchett and the Sam Vimes character, and Vimes, his rant about the economics of being poor, that if you're poor, you can't afford to buy good boots. and you have to buy cheap boots. Those cheap boots wear out quicker than good boots. And
Yep.
so you end up having to buy multiple
More.
pairs of cheap boots,
Yep.
which ultimately costs you more. That is the economic rant that you get so often when
The
people
poor
talk
pay
about
more. The poor pay more. Yeah.
the cost of being poor. And Vimes' anger about that is Pratchett's anger about it. And a lot of Pratchett's work, although it is highly comedic, although it is fantastic fantasy, but he has some very pointed remarks to make.
Oh my goodness, he's brilliant. You know, I read Guards earlier, and his social critique is very much present in the Discworld books. So yeah, and Paul is an academic himself, so he knows what I was talking about. And very true, Garrett, absolutely true. Yeah, so there's no, thank you, Michael, for asking. There is no link yet. There's no pre-order available just yet. There will be a couple of weeks before March 21st. There'll be a pre-order available on the ebook only, because that's how Amazon does things. And yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, does academia reward depth? So you get to be a specialist on a certain thing. And if there is a university with that need, then yeah, you're competing with probably a handful of other people for that position, I suppose. And that's the thing about academia too, that in some ways, I understand, and it's important because we all have our little contribution to the broader world of scholarship. But it does tend to encourage that specialization, whereas the idea of somebody being broadly knowledgeable, that's something you tend to see less of, I think, in modern academia, which is a shame in a way. And it used to be much more common to have somebody who was fairly well versed in various fields. But now we're so siloed and we're so narrow in our realms of expertise that I think we might miss a lot of things that you could see if you're an expert in various realms. You get these connections. You know, I think of books that were written by people like Douglas Hofstadter, what's it called? Gödel Escher Bach, you know, An Eternal Golden Braid. This is written by a guy he's got his particular realms of expertise, but he's drawing from all these other places that he has taken the time to be at least well-versed in enough to use them intelligently. Or the book Behave by Robert Sapolsky, or, you know, there are various good examples, even fairly recent ones, of people who are trying to draw from various disciplines. But so, yeah, I'm not sure where we're going with that, but yeah, there you go. I think that's a great example where somebody who has a knowledge of anthropology, and also, you know, Mr. Erickson here, I think it's fair to say he has some anthropological knowledge, some know-how, and that was most definitely an informative part of his writing experience with the Malazan books. And Tolkien with linguistics, absolutely yes, to the degree that when I was a kid, I thought to be a fantasy writer, you had to know a bunch of languages. So, yeah. So true, Derry. Yeah, about Pratchett's use of language. Yeah. That's it. That's exactly what I was talking about, Glenn. Yeah. So, are there dragons? Somebody's asking if I'm going to have dragons. AP, should I spill the beans? I don't know.
There are time-traveling alien dragons.
Let's just put it this way. Like Tolkien, as a kid, I desired dragons. So,
well, and all those fantasy maps, there's always that bit off to the side that's been unexplored that just says, and there be dragons.
Yeah. No, I love dragons, and I don't think I could have written a fantasy without dragons. They might not appear right away, but you might see some dragons. At least my take on them. Yeah.
This is another weird one that comes up with fantasy discussions. like dragons as sort of hexapedal beasts or quadrupeds, and you go, well, if they have wings and sort of 2 feet, oh well, those are wyverns, not dragons. Dragons have 4 legs and 2 wings. You go, they're made up. But there are message boards where people have been fighting that fight, and you go, yes, in heraldry, the quadruped is a wyvern and the hexaped is a dragon. Yeah, in heraldry, but that doesn't apply to this secondary world that's in this fantasy novel.
Right. Yeah. And then there's the second part of Mick Garfield's question, my elves. So my elves are not Celtic inspired. I will say that. They are, in fact, so I always think of the distinction between, you don't get a lot of, you have references to elves, and it is in fact a Germanic word in, for example, the Norse material. And in Old English poetry, elves are mentioned. What we're missing from Old English is just it was one of the things that Tolkien lamented. Like, what have we lost? All the storytelling that we've lost. There must have been stories of elves, I'm sure, in Old English, but we don't have any really. But the very few references that we do have to them in Old English poetry suggest that elves were freaking scary, that they were not actually Tolkien type elves, that they were, unless they were scary, beautiful or something. But when we think of elves, we think of these elegant, pointy-eared, beautiful people. In Old English poetry, they are just scary. And I don't mean necessarily like monstrously scary or anything like that, but just scary, like otherworldly. So I do have, I think, a different take. I think my take on elves is different from what you'll see. I'm going back to much older hints, at least in much older traditions of what elves might have been. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
But even when Tolkien was writing, because you had like the Tinkerbell-esque of the sort of the Victorian era view of elves.
Yeah, which Tolkien did not like. Yeah.
Which Tolkien didn't like. What was the was it Arthur Conan Doyle? Was it the Cottingdale Fairies? What was that whole thing? And Kodak had a prize if you could prove that the photograph had been faked, but it was the little girls who saw the fairies at the end of the garden, and there's the famous photograph, and it was Arthur Conan Doyle was involved in this whole thing. But that was one view of elves.
Yeah.
And then you had the more
fairy
Celtic
view.
elves,
Yeah.
but which were different, scarier, alien.
Yeah.
And not cutesy little Tinkerbell. And there's even within a small geographical area 2 radically different views of what elves were, what pixies were, what fairy was.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant point because, sorry, I have to go back about the dragon.
Yeah.
That is fantastic because again, sorry, that was, and I did it. I assumed a base Western norm of talking about dragons and heraldry about Western heraldry.
Yeah. And Rob makes a similar point there.
Yeah. And that is exactly right. And I apologize.
Well, I think it's fine.
But that point about what fairies are, what elves are, as if there's a real form. And you go, no, because we're drawing on lots of different traditions and we're drawing on different interpretations of those traditions at the time. And hey, Alan, hope you're steadily improving and feeling better.
Yeah, he seems to be very much himself. Although I don't know, I'm not inhabiting a body that has a broken pelvis and femur and ribs and everything else. But yes, Alan, we're all wishing you well. And Alan is somebody who's met my elves because he is going to be the audiobook. We were talking about you, Alan, earlier, and being the audiobook narrator. And yes, Alan has met my elves, so he has a notion of what I'm talking about when I say my elves go back to Old English hints of elves and that they're kind of scary. So, yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing Alan's pronunciation of some of those names.
Oh, well, Alan and I are going to sit down and have like a few like sessions of like pronunciation help. I think so we can get, hopefully that is true. Actually, they were scarier in the first age in many respects. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, you do get. I think in modern fantasy that idea of elves being dangerous is present. But
and again, quite a lot of the Celtic inspired stories, because of the nature of that mythology and folklore, is quite different in some respects to what a lot of people think of as elves and fairy, because the Disney version of a lot of these stories is what has entered the common consciousness. That we think of the Disney form of a lot of this instead of going back to not even the original, because even then saying original, you go, well, what is original? It's at least earlier versions,
like these that the Garden Gnome is talking about, the Tua de Danann. These are, the Irish version of the fairy. Your people, your folks. Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're wonderful. I love those earlier mythological traditions for sure. Yes, awesome. Alan is, he is walking now at least, and he's on a cane. So that's progress. Brilliant. And he's been practicing one of my characters. Awesome. That is good to hear. And he's been writing down all the names. And look at this. I know that you have experience with audiobook narrators mispronouncing or giving alternative pronunciations. Let's put it that way.
But if you go back to Alan's comment there where he had mentioned that character name.
Yes. Okay.
What people don't realize is, if you can just bring it up on screen.
I'll get it. There he is.
So that character name is actually pronounced Frank.
Yeah.
It's the old English way of pronouncing that, Frank. Right. And it puts a lot of people off.
Yeah, the BL in Old English was a fr sound. Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful, AP. Very helpful. Yeah. So for those
I'm willing to help with all of them.
Yes. Your help will be just tremendous for the pronunciation of my character names, I'm sure. and Steve could tell us all about that too, I'm sure. But yes, famously, I forget where it is when they finally started listening to what you told them, but at some point in the Malazan audiobooks, I think, right? They actually started getting pronunciations that were closer to what you and Ian Esselmont actually would have said.
Wait, Steve mispronounces it all the time. Like, he can't pronounce any of the names correctly.
That's true. Yeah. That's his fault. Definitely his fault. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, that would be fun, actually. Yeah. We might have to do like a blooper style video releases of Alan trying to do the audiobooks. That would be fun. So Alan and I have some ideas for our collaborations that are audiobook related. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. See, AP, this is your influence.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's Old English can be a real struggle for people. I just wanted to help there.
Okay. That's very helpful. Yeah. So, but that's the thing with fantasy. I think we all have to be a little accepting of different pronunciations, right? Yes, we can all blame Alan for all the messed up pronunciations. That's good. I like that. And yep. Everybody's Frank in my books. Everybody's Frank. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think I have.
No, I know what you're talking about though, but I haven't actually read it. I think I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure that's the way it's spelled, but I could be wrong. Oh, here it is. Okay. I was wondering about this. There it is. So they never even asked, I guess, until the Carcanis trilogy was produced. Okay. I wonder why they wanted to get the Teist names correct and nothing else.
the Teisty and the
the Tiste and the But to be fair, the first time I ever talked with, actually with you and with Steven Erickson, I apologize for my pronunciation. And do you remember that? My pronunciation of Malazan, which in my older videos, anyone can hear me say Malazan, which is a common enough pronunciation. And I apologized, and I realized that it's like Rome is Roman, Malaz, the island where it all got started, Malazan, right? That's just the adjective form of Malaz, right? Malazan. So somebody from Malaz is Malazan, and an empire named after Malaz is the Malazan Empire. So yeah.
Well, only if you're from that part of the world.
That's true. Hey, that's a spoiler.
But they're all called Frank.
Yeah. So I guess we're safe. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Oh, that's great. I love it. Thank you, Alan. That's exactly what I was looking for in all my characters. Yes. Okay.
But which South? South, like Cork?
Oh, not your South. Sorry. Although that would be cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, that's true. I suppose if you are from that world, there would be different ways of pronouncing it too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have more of a Darujistani accent.
You favor the Darujistani, I think. Yeah. Well, whereas mine's more of a Dalhonese, I think, flavor, perhaps. Right? I don't know.
But at the end of the day, like, I think people sometimes, for certain authors, were very particular about how you pronounce things.
Yeah.
But I think most authors realize that when someone is reading it, they are going to come up with their own way of interpreting the word, their own way of pronouncing it. And that's going to be influenced by, the culture and place that they're from.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's fine. And by the way, when I apologize to Steven Erickson, he's like, it's fine. It's whatever is fine. He's very nice. Exactly. So there he is, just confirming what I just said. Yep. That's it. So have fun with it. The point is to have fun and to get a great experience from the reading, not to pronounce everything correctly, because we're not tweed wearing academics around here, right? We're not. Oh, wait. Oh, oops. Oh no. Oops. There goes AP. Yeah, I agree, Garrett. That's fair. I think the author is happily dead in some cases. And if you're an author who's going to go around insisting that your pronunciation is the way everybody should say your characters, then I think you're going to have a lot of, you're going to have high blood pressure. So I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah. So there we go. Yes, because Alan is also famous for alternative pronunciations at times, I think, right? That's fair, right?
Yeah, the way of Aidan is.
Yeah. Or idam, as some cheesy people say. And here's Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, what's going on? Saying hello. I am so glad that we have the correct pronunciation here, because I felt like I wasn't quite getting it right when I was saying Apto-Cannavalian. And the funny thing is, and I told this to Steven Erickson once, and I think he was actually delighted by this fact. But when I write AP Canavan in my phone these days, the autocorrect makes Canavan Cannavalian. So this is a true statement. I don't know why that is. It actually does that. It's like my phone knows your true self, AP.
It's like when I try to type in Philip, it comes up Nemesis.
Oh no, thank you, Jimmy. Yep. Yeah. So yes, like a kick up the backside. Precisely. So, oh yeah, and Alan is going to Rome in 3 weeks. That is cool. Yep. Have fun over there. That's good.
Which, of course, is pronounced Rome by those in the know.
Yes, Rami. Yes.
I think this is just going to be an ongoing thing now. We're just going to mispronounce everything.
As we should. As we should. Which is why my author name, maybe it should be Philip.
Philip Nemesis Chase. I told you.
Yes. Well, there is that. So I actually didn't. It was the weirdest thing when it started coming up. Canavan started coming up Canavalian. Every time my autocorrect wants to make it, it's just, I think it's such a great fact. So yes, Paul, we'll see you. I will see you.
Take
and
care.
yeah, he's going to see you at ICFA too. So yeah.
Well, tell you what, Philip, for your if you send me the next book, I'm going to buy a whole set of red pens just for you.
Ooh, red pens. Ooh, yeah. Then the blood will flow. The blood will be flowing.
Were you ever told that when you were marking student essays not to mark in red?
I was told that. I was told that if I mark in red, it would be traumatizing for my students.
But it's weird. It's because I was told much the same thing, and it's why I would never make annotations in a manuscript in red.
Really? Because I really wouldn't care. I think the original reason that people wrote with a red pen is it's clearly visible. You can see it, right? It's not because they're trying to hint at blood or anything like that. I think it was just, yeah, you can see red. If you use a black pen, it's hard to see the comments. Even a blue pen is, so red is just visible. And when somebody first told me about marking in red being traumatizing for the students, I thought, really?
And so, I mean, we were told to avoid it, but ever since then, just then, I would make annotations in blue, but or green.
So there we go. Alan is a teacher too, so there we go. I think the red brings home the tragedy of the whole situation, right?
And if you do it in green, obviously that's Vulcan blood.
Yes, yeah, the poor Vulcans. Why should we discriminate against Vulcans, right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. There we go. Neon pink. Yes, they will actually. Oh, there we go.
I do know people who have a selection of different like color, and they just work through, and they have all sorts of funky colors.
Yeah. Yes, the bleeding dagger is a little bit more of a direct message. Yeah. And Alan, I like that. Alan, you even do the digital ones in red. Nice.
And all caps.
Okay. Ooh, I like it. Yeah, this is true.
So even if you do it in blue, they see it in red. So you might as well go with red.
You might as well keep it in red. Yeah. So true. Yeah. Especially when they change your character names. Yeah.
I think there was only one of them that I just flat out changed in every comment.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
the other ones were genuine mistakes, because I don't know if you do that. I've always done this, that sort of particularly with fantasy names, that sometimes they get reorganized in my head as a way that I understand them. And then that's what their name becomes, even if it doesn't quite match what's on the page. But that's now what I actually see.
Yeah.
And it happens sometimes. The other ones where it happens is...
Of course, Alan, you would use all caps. Of course. Is anyone in this entire chat surprised to learn that Alan uses all caps when he writes to his students? Yeah. Yep. I can see it. I can see it. Wouldn't it be fun to actually read, for those of us who are teachers, to read each other's comments on student papers? That would be kind of revealing, wouldn't it? Oh. Have you read? I have not actually, but you have. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I haven't read the War of the Roses one, but I thought I had a bunch of Con Eggleton books up there.
Okay.
They might have gotten. I might have put them back in the box.
How do you say his last name?
Eggleton.
Eggleton. Okay. Okay. I mean,
I've never met him.
Why am I asking you? You don't know how to pronounce names.
I can barely pronounce my own name.
Oh.
I have a funny feeling didn't he write a bunch of Rome stuff?
I don't know. Alan should know that.
I don't
He's
know.
the one who's going to Rome.
I went through a phase of reading a lot of historical fiction.
Did you? Okay, I didn't know that about you. Yeah, I read a lot of history back in the day, but not as much historical fiction. Certainly some. When it was medieval, especially, I was interested. Like the Name of the Rose, and what's the one about building a cathedral? Oh gosh, what is that called? It's a pretty famous book. I read it twice actually. Somebody in the chat help me out. What's the historical fiction famous one where they build a cathedral? Anyway, it was good. I cannot remember. Pillars of the Earth. Thank you, Polly. Pillars of the Earth. Yes, yeah, that's it. And Eugene got it too. Okay, and Jarl Trippin, all of you. Thank you. Yes, and Glenn. Yeah. Okay.
Was it Pillars of the Earth?
Thank you, AP.
See, this is what an editor does. Take someone else's idea and then take all the credit for it.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, by Ken Follett. Thank you, chat. Much appreciated. Yes, that's what you do. Okay, so very effective technique when grading papers is to scribble so that the student cannot even possibly read what you're trying to say.
But because we used to have to hand annotate essays, and I remember like starting and writing like that, and then rotating the paper, and then carrying on down the side, and then and so for the student actually had to like read, and the notation went all the way around their paper because you were writing in all of the margins.
Now, this is a very perceptive question. When are we going to get the death of the editor?
Editors are immortal. Don't you know this?
Yep. The death of the critic. You have to read Crackpot Trail. You have to read Crackpot Trail to get the death of the critic.
It is. I have to admit, it is one of my favorite stories that Erickson has written.
Oh, it's a delightful story. We talked about it with Ruth and Bad. That was a good conversation. That's on your channel, right? The Crackpot Trail one? Yeah. That's a good conversation. Yeah. So, okay. Death of the Reader. Yeah, I don't know. That would be an interesting one, right?
I think that's where we started.
Yeah.
We've kind of moved past that. I don't know. I think, but with death of the author or any, there has to be a balance between positions.
Yes.
Ignoring the totality of the author is, I think, a mistake. Now, interesting. There's a scholar I follow, and they were saying that for science fiction and fantasy scholarship, there is an emphasis on paying attention to the author that science fiction and fantasy scholars, quite a lot of us, don't use or subscribe to death of the author to the same extent that other disciplines do.
Right.
And this is a problem. I'm like, it's not a problem. It's the fact that our authors are still alive.
Yeah.
A lot of the work that we look at, the authors are still alive. Because if you are a scholar of, let's say that, you were studying Mary Shelley, and you started with Frankenstein, but you then went to try to find her collected letters. You're like,
right.
Well, why are you looking at her letters? Oh, well, it gives me insight into, this is the same thing that you do when you listen to author interviews and you do that.
I mean, I did it on my dissertation. I was looking all over William Morris's letters for comments he made about his translations and his prose romances, and I used those comments a lot. So
I find it kind of strange that there is a desire for the author to physically die, and then we pillage their correspondence, their diaries, emails. Then we're allowed to read interviews that they give, because that'll give us insight. You go, well, when they're still alive, we can actually ask them. And I've always said that if any of my friends who became Shakespearean scholars, if they had the opportunity, if some technology was invented whereby you could travel back in time and actually talk to Shakespeare, would any of them turn it down?
Yeah, yeah. Who would? Yeah. This is a good point, Nicholas. Yeah, I think for me, and now I'm starting to think about it from the author perspective because I'm self-publishing my books. So yeah, well, I think we've all heard Stephen Erickson bring up. I've brought it up with him during chats as well, and I think he has some really cool things to say about it. But for me, I'm starting to think about it a little bit from I guess, an author perspective. And do I want to weigh in when I hear somebody speculating about what is going on in my books and I hadn't thought of that before? Let's not say I disagree or anything. Let's just say I hadn't thought of that particular perspective. Or let's say I do disagree. Do I want to weigh in and say, no, that's not what I meant when I wrote that? Or do I want to be quiet? And, because weighing in, you do risk, I think to some degree, stifling the dialogue, right? You're stifling the ability of your readers to speculate. And you don't want to do too much of that as a writer, I think, right? You want to stay away from saying, this is what my book means, right? You don't want to go there. But go ahead, do the but.
I was going to say, weirdly enough, like what we have done with the Malazan discussions we've had,
right?
And where we've gone through and talked about a scene and talked about themes that are being evoked and how it connects to it, and right. So we're definitively laying out a way to interpret something, and people have commented on our videos,
right? So there's Stephen Erickson. Yeah, I think so. I acknowledging that someone has read your books and appreciated and taken the time to express their appreciation and interpretation. I think that's just good etiquette, right? For the most part. And I think it is also probably fair to say that most people would agree that if you're a reviewer doing a negative review, don't tag the writer on that one. Right?
But one of the major reasons why death of the author became so prevalent was the idea that an author's interpretation, the author's intent, was the only way to interpret something.
Yes.
And clearly that isn't the case, because an author can fail to convey their intent adequately for the reader.
Right.
Readers have autonomy in the creation of meaning, but that doesn't mean that every interpretation a reader comes up with is a correct or sustainable interpretation of a text, because misreading is actually a thing, despite the fact that we want to give everyone a gold star for participation.
Right.
So
I'm getting a star. I'm getting a star from Alan. 1 star. Wait, Alan, is that a participation star that you're giving me there?
But if he tags you 3 times, does that count as 3 stars then?
I was kind of wondering that too. Yeah.
That's kind of a mediocre review. Middle of the road. It's not too bad. Like, take that. That's above average. 2 points. Yeah. Well, is it 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10? Like that makes a big difference.
It might even be 1 out of 1.
But when we have people who weigh in, and whether we like it or not, and I don't think either one of us has ever set out to set ourselves up as an authority on the stuff that we talk about. We have our opinions, we have our interpretations. We like talking about it just the same as everyone else.
Right.
But for some reason, that people go, oh well, they said that, so that must be what it is. And you go, well, no, I'm not the authority on any of this stuff, and neither are you. And
that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, death of the author sounds so a little bit extreme and permanent, doesn't it?
And it was a play on La Mort d'Arthur as well, but because it was a good pun in French. But when we think of authorial intent and what authors say, just because an author says this is what I meant for it, you go, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Oh, Alan, that is mean.
That is so low. I mean, literally low, like 1 out of 100. That's very low. Yeah.
or is that it's number one? It's the top.
Oh, I see what you mean, Alan. Yes, it's an inverse order. So one is actually the best. I'll take it that way.
But the idea that anyone can go, this is definitive. You can go, it's definitive. Like an author can say, this is what I intended. That's
Right.
great. It gives us clarity. It gives us something to discuss. It gives us something to compare and contrast what is happening in the text with what they said. And it can
Yeah.
make sense. And you go, well, I don't quite see that. Or I can see that you tried to do that, but it didn't work for me. And this is why. Like
Right.
those things are fascinating.
I agree.
They allow us great insight into a text, into how it was written, how the effects were achieved, how we responded to it, and why we responded a certain way. So the
Definitely.
idea of an author weighing in, I have never had a problem with it. But an author saying, no, you are not allowed to interpret it that way. You go, ooh, well, that's different.
You got a little far there. Yeah. And you
but
stifled the conversation. You don't want to do that as an author. Thank you, Alan, for clarifying. You don't want to stifle that conversation as an author, right? So I think there's a bit of a balancing act involved.
yeah.
And Mike is here. Great to see you, Mike. And oh yeah, kids, I get it. I definitely get it. So thank you so much, Mike. And you're a big part of that, frankly. A lot of my subscribers came this way because of you. So I got to thank you for that. And I'm so glad you're here. So yeah. Yeah, we have been doing some social commentary here. That's for sure when we're talking about all this death of the author stuff. But I really do think that you have a balancing act that you have to achieve as an author. And it's tricky, I think, maybe a little bit. Maybe I'm overthinking this. But
well, there's also, I think, an assumption that every society feels the same way about this. And you go, that's not true. Different cultures have different social norms.
Yeah.
And
sorry, Scarecrow. Definitely not ignoring you.
But argument and discussion and different ways of approaching it are different in different cultures. And the idea of assuming, well, there's only one way to behave, or there's only one way that this must be done. You go, who is imposing that rule?
Yeah, that's true. I guess you're absolutely right. There's no one right way for an author to interact with readers. Yeah, it's and I like the pun here. It's a minefield. Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, I guess so. And you, as you know very well, not all interactions are going to be positive. That's for sure. But I think even on this little platform, even as people who talk about books around here, we get some interactions that can be dicey at times. I think is that a good way to put it? I'm trying to be diplomatic here. People reacting to our videos in ways that surprise us. Like I've definitely made videos where I feel like, did this person even watch my video before commenting?
Of course not. I never watch your videos before commenting, Philip. You know that.
I know you have the volume turned down all the way for all my videos, but
and then as I'm watching, I actually, I put words in your mouth. I say what I think that you're actually saying. So all your videos sound like, isn't AP wonderful? AP is great. I think AP is wonderful.
Oh, you're the one who writes all those? Okay. You should have AP on more often. He's the nicest. You're the nefarious one. You're the one writing all those. Now I get it. Oh, hello, Jonathan. So, and there's Varsha. Hello. It's great to see you. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Where's Glenn? I have a habit of commenting while I watch video. I think that's fair. And sometimes you realize as you're commenting, whoops, that was addressed later in the video or something like that. And I do that a lot myself. So that's fair. As long as you're reacting to something that you actually heard the person say. But I think I sometimes get people commenting just on like the title of my video and assuming they know what I'm going to say. and obviously making a comment that is like, what are they talking about? Because they have some preconceived notion, I guess, of what they think I'm going to say, maybe. So, all right, we have somebody who recently watched your video on how to adapt Malazan. Ah, yes. Yeah, that would be awesome. I think there's a lot of us who are waiting for that day when that Hollywood producer, or does it doesn't have to be Hollywood, I guess, right? It could be coming from somewhere else. But
Well, it's interesting. When people say, "Oh, this book could never be adapted," which is something they've said about Dune, it's something they said about the Lord of the Rings. It gets said about a lot of things because quite often you look at it, you look at the scope and scale of it, and when if we filmed everything that was on every single page, it would be 27 hours long and really weird, and the pacing would be all over the place. Yeah, that's why most adaptations don't follow faithfully page by page.
Right.
So there's always a different way of looking at the text, and with something like the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and even if you were just looking at the Malazan Book of the Fallen and not the entirety of the Malazan world, there are so many different ways that you could approach it.
Yeah.
You can.
I really feel like the most intelligent way to approach it would be to adapt Crackpot Trail first. Everybody in the chat, don't you think that would be the most, I think, efficient, intelligent way? Everyone would get the right impression, I think, from that, right? Hey, I wonder who we could cast as Apto Cannavalian. Maybe Brad Pitt.
You are going to get beaten. I'm going to come round there and beat you.
I'm not going to be at ICFA this year. No, but you were making, I think, a serious point there somewhere.
That there are different ways to do it. And I know that even on that video, people were saying, oh, it needs to be animated.
Yeah.
And people were, it needs to be animated or it needs to be anime. Obviously, by anime, they meant a specific form of animation. But even then, though, those comments very rarely settled on a style of animation that they could all agree on.
Right.
And it's the same thing as saying, oh, it should be live action. But, what style of live action? Do you want it to look more and sound more like Game of Thrones? Do you want it to look and sound more like Wheel of Time? That more sort of general or family friendly approach? It all depends. Are you doing it as a film?
Yeah.
Are you doing it as a series of films? Because a film, if you're thinking about it, you're trying to structure it for about a 90-minute with peaks and troughs to work over 90 minutes. Is it going to be a TV show? Okay. Is it streaming or is it going to be network TV where you want people tuning in each week? Like all of these things affect and alter quite dramatically sometimes how you structure what you're doing.
We're going to get an action figure. Oh, it gets better. Okay, wait, I think there's a serious point. There's a serious comment here. Yeah. Okay, that is a serious comment. We're being serious now. Yes.
Yeah, but there are really fun things. I mean, if you wanted like a self-contained episode to do, then you could do something like the Chain of Dogs. But remember that the Chain of Dogs only works because it's broken up. Because if it's just focused on the Chain of Dogs and only the Chain of Dogs the entire time, that would become exhausting and tiring and very repetitive. You need it intercut with something to provide the relief and contrast.
Right.
So even then they're going, oh, we'll just do the Chain of Dogs. How would you break it up? How would you separate it out? How would you do those transitions? Those are all really interesting questions.
Yeah.
Because then you're thinking about the structure of the story and how the story is being told, where you're putting in dramatic moments, where you're putting in moments of respite, where you're putting in the comedic moments.
Right.
So it's not. I think sometimes people underestimate the complexity of these sorts of things, because no matter what decision you make, guaranteed there will be people who say, "Oh no, it would have been better if," or "Well, that's not what I wanted," or "I expected something else." And you know what? I can't. No one can control what you expect, what you think, what you want. No one can control that but you.
No, the showmakers should have read my mind.
And the thing is, they go, "Oh well, they didn't want to please the fans," as if all fans want the same thing. You only need to look at that Malazan adaptation video to see that the fans can't agree on any one way to approach adapting the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Right. And I know on Reddit, like, people have said it shouldn't be adapted because that would just ruin the books. How would a film version or a TV show ruin the book? How is it altering the book in any way? Oh, because it would alter how I think about the book. So you go, oh, so you're weak-minded and you are easily swayed and influenced, that the mere fact that something exists as a film or a TV show is going to ruin the book for you. That's a you problem, not a TV show or adaptation problem.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. Having just finished The Shadow of the Torturer, I'm inclined initially to agree that it would be really hard to adapt the Book of the New Sun. There's just so much going on in there that you're not sure if it's actually going on or not. I suppose you could have it with the understanding that you're getting a certain perspective, narrative perspective, even as it's being shown. But it would be very hard to pull that off, I think.
But think of how third-person focalization works.
Right.
So even though it's in third person, even though that it's an external view of the scene, but the scene is being focalized through a character. It's their perception of the scene is what we're actually seeing, and we see this quite often in murder mysteries, where someone has viewed this is the thing that happened, and then later on we find out that's not what happened. That's what they saw, but that's not actually what happened. Right. So there are ways to do it where you could leave in enough visual clues that what you're seeing is not necessarily real. There are different ways that, like, A Scanner Darkly, the adaptation of Philip K. Dick's story. It started, I think, with Keanu Reeves. They used rotoscoping on live action, and then they were playing around with things. So you can actually use different visual styles to signify different things. You can use different colored filters to denote the different perspectives.
Right. So, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
There are all sorts of different tricks that you can do. Doesn't mean that every book should be adapted. No. Like, I don't think the Book of the New Sun would. It would be fascinating to see how someone adapted it, rather than looking forward to seeing the adaptation. I think there are certain books that lend themselves more to it.
Yeah, this is an interesting. Oh wait, actually no, sorry, that was the other one by Daniel. An anthology series where each episode was its own more or less complete story. That's one way of going at it, I think. Right?
But you know what's hilarious about that? Think of the number of people who complain about the Malazan Book of the Fallen and the fact that Book 2 doesn't naturally follow Book 1, that Book 3 then jumps back, that Book 4, and you go, oh, so like an anthology of independent events that are in a sequence, and yet that is one of the most frequently complained about aspects.
Well, it's the short story thing. So and Stephen Erickson has talked many times about the fact that a lot of his writing training is short story oriented, and so there's a certain element of that to the Malazan series. And I think what Daniel is suggesting would be kind of like a screen version of short stories, right? So I don't know how.
And, you know, that's been done before with multiple TV shows, but even anthology series like The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits, where it was a whole sequence of things, and then you had ones that actually returned to previous stories. But Like there's so many different ways. This is one of the things I love about narrative. There are different ways to do things. And even when someone talks about a novel, you can have a mosaic novel, which is literally made up of independent little mini narratives that when you take that step back and look at it as a whole, it gives you a picture of something else. A fix-up, which is the short stories that are then given a frame narrative to link them all together. And it's one of the Witcher books is a fix-up, because it was a bunch of short stories that then a frame narrative was animation, like the opening of Witcher 3, the computer game.
Oh, I've seen that, actually. I have seen that. I know what he's talking about. Yeah.
But you could also have animation like the Witcher animated, what was it, Evening of the Wolf or something on that was on Netflix, which is, I think it was 2D animation, which was slightly different. Or you could have animation mimicking the 90s sort of cell-like animation. Or you could have something more like what was the League of Legends animated one? But it had hyper-saturated color for one thing. That was very warm colors in one setting. And then neon, sort of neon punk stuff for the underworld. But it was highly visualized, highly stylized, and not realistic. It was moving away from realism. There are all of these different ways of approaching telling of story and tone and style. That it's not just about a literal, we just photographed what happened, we filmed what happened. That's not storytelling. It's not even documentary making, because documentary making involves a lot more manipulation than that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So Chris Cartwright asks, would you ever want The Way of Edan to be adapted into a movie or series? Wow, that's actually, I mean, I'd be lying if I hadn't, if I said I've never thought about it. It would be really, I think it would work pretty well, actually, if it were done right. And then I would guess that they wouldn't want me too involved. In most cases, I suspect they don't want the author hanging around saying, no, please, don't do that, or, that sort of thing. So I would be super nervous about it. I doubt I'll ever be in the position to worry about it. So I can just sort of fantasize, I suppose. But yeah, I think it would work well. I think it's in many ways, do you agree, AP? I feel like my writing is pretty visual, that there are certain scenes, at least in my mind, that I actually, because typically when I write, I actually will lie down even and think about the scene and see it before I start writing it. So I write very visually that way. And I feel like those scenes would translate into a visual medium pretty well, I think. So I feel
I can see a lot of it as interpretive dance.
So we have some other suggestions here for Malazan adaptation.
He-Man of the 1980s, or He-Man of the 1990s, or He-Man of the 21st century.
I did not realize you were a He-Man expert, AP. Let's see. Oh, here's another suggestion. Good luck with that, Steve.
Harryhausen. I miss the Harryhausen stop motion effects that they had. Do you remember, like, Jason and the Argonauts, and you had the stop motion, like, skeletons fighting? That was an element that now, because of CGI and this want or this desire for, we have to make everything look, it made them stand out. It made them feel different, and there's a beauty to that, rather than trying to make it seamlessly blend in.
Good luck with that. Oh yeah, please do make sure you give Apto a ponytail, Steve, when you're doing the Play-Doh. So, oh wow, I didn't know that. That guy's still around, I guess. All right, cool. Awesome. Well, everybody, I think this has been a wonderful chat, and I hate to cut it short, but I know that...
Well, you can't cut it short. It's 2 hours, 40 minutes long.
Yeah, so I'm cutting it long. Oh, wait, Where should he put the ponytail? We'll tell you after the live stream. Oh no. Oh, some more helpful suggestions. Okay. Before we get any worse around here. Oh, thank you, Rob. Before it gets any worse around here. And AP, I have to thank you for being such a sport. For first of all agreeing to be present here, and oh yeah, this is true. This is
I'm unsubscribing now. Well, Philip, thank you very much for inviting me. This is a lot of fun, and
yeah,
I love having these conversations with you.
Yeah, I do too. This is why I'm here, to chat with lovely people and good people and insightful people, and that you're all of the above, even though you are my nemesis. So I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate how much you've been part of the life of my channel and how much I've learned from you. My favorite thing really I've ever done is definitely our Malazan chats together. Those will always be very special for me. And I'm sure we'll have some more amazing chats too.
The Malazan chats or Malazan chats?
Either or. We can do both. Yeah. But thank you everyone as well in the chat. I appreciate all of you being present here and helping us to celebrate. Love the questions. It's just been a grand time, and I thank you all for being part of the life of my channel. It wouldn't exist without all of you people. So all the thanks from the bottom of my heart. So yeah, wonderful day, lots to celebrate, and yeah, thank you, AP. And we will end this thing. It takes 1,000,000 seconds to do it.